Summer does not kill plants slowly. It kills them quickly, from the ground up, and usually before the gardener realizes what is happening. The leaves may still look green for several days after the damage is done. The stems may still stand. The plant may even push out a few new flowers as a last-ditch biological response. But underground, in the root zone, where water is absorbed and nutrients are processed, and the entire structure of the plant is anchored, the temperature can reach a point where living tissue simply stops functioning. At that point, the visible plant is already in serious trouble. What the gardener sees on the surface is almost always behind the real story by several days. This is the central problem with summer gardening that most discussions get wrong. The focus tends to land on watering, on drought stress, on the visible wilting that happens on a hot afternoon. Those things matter, but they are symptoms of a more fundamental condition. The soil itself becomes a hostile environment. When bare soil sits in direct sun during a heat wave, the surface temperature can exceed 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Even at 6 inches deep, where most feeder roots live and work, temperatures regularly reach into the 90s during an extended hot stretch. Most vegetable and flower roots begin to suffer somewhere between 85 and 95 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on the species. At 100 degrees of soil temperature, many annual crops are in active decline even if they have adequate water. Gardeners who water faithfully and still lose plants in summer, or who watch their tomatoes stop setting fruit despite appearing healthy, or who find their hostas melting at the margins in July, are often dealing with a soil temperature problem. Water cannot fully compensate for excessive heat in the root zone. The roots need to function in order to absorb the water. When they are heat-stressed, their capacity to pull water and nutrients into the plant drops significantly, which is why an overheated plant may wilt even in moist soil. The water is there. The roots simply cannot do their job in those conditions. Understanding why summer heat damages plants from below requires a brief look at what roots actually do. Root cells, like all living cells, contain enzymes that drive the chemical reactions of life. Those enzymes operate within a specific temperature range. When soil temperatures rise above the optimal range for a given plant, the enzymes begin to lose efficiency. Nutrient uptake slows, respiration becomes labored. The plant starts spending more energy maintaining basic cell function than it can afford while also supporting flowers and fruit. At sustained high temperatures, root cells begin to die outright. Beneficial soil fungi and bacteria, the organisms that make nutrients available to roots in the first place, also suffer in extreme heat. A hot, bare soil surface is not just uncomfortable for plants, it is functionally degraded at a biological level. The fix for this problem is not expensive. It is not technical. It does not require a particular gadget or a specific fertilizer. It has been documented by extension programs, agricultural stations, and home gardening guides for more than 5 decades. Mulch, applied correctly and consistently, is the most effective tool a gardener has for managing summer soil temperatures. The cost per square foot of garden bed using the most commonly available organic mulch materials is genuinely close to a few dollars for a standard garden space. The effect on soil temperature is measurable, documented, and significant enough to change the outcome of an entire summer garden. The science behind this is not complicated. Mulch works by blocking direct solar radiation from reaching the soil surface. Bare soil absorbs the sun's energy and converts it to heat, which then conducts downward through the soil profile. When a layer of mulch sits on top of the soil, it intercepts that radiation before it reaches the ground. Some of the heat is reflected away, some is absorbed by the mulch material itself, which is a poor conductor and therefore does not transfer that heat efficiently into the soil below. The net result is a soil surface that stays dramatically cooler than it would if bare. Research from university extension programs and agricultural experiment stations across the country has documented this effect consistently. A 3-inch layer of organic mulch can reduce soil surface temperatures by 15 to 25 degrees Fahrenheit compared to bare soil.
At 6 inches deep, the temperature difference is smaller but still meaningful, often in the range of 5 to 15 degrees, depending on the mulch material, the thickness of application, and the ambient conditions. That difference, in practical terms, is the difference between a root zone at 90 degrees and one at 75. It is the difference between a tomato plant producing fruit and one that has shut down its reproductive systems to conserve energy. It is the difference between a pepper that continues to flower through August and one that drops all its buds by mid-July. The practice of mulching has been part of farming and horticulture for most of recorded history. Farmers in various cultures have long used crop residues, straw, leaves, and other plant material to cover soil between rows and around plants. The formal study of mulching effects in the 20th century brought scientific language to something people had already understood through observation for generations. By the 1960s and 1970s, land-grant universities across the United States were producing detailed recommendations on mulch types, application depths, and timing. The research showed clearly and repeatedly that mulched garden beds outperformed bare beds in summer heat in terms of plant survival, yield, water retention, and soil biology. These were not minor improvements. In some trials involving heat-sensitive crops like lettuce, peppers, and strawberries, the yield differences between mulched and unmulched plots were dramatic enough to define whether a planting was a productive or essentially a failure. The $3 figure in the context of summer mulching refers to the cost of straw, wood chips, shredded leaves, or similar organic materials needed to cover a standard garden bed. In much of the country, a bale of straw can be purchased for $2 to $4 and will cover 40 to 50 square feet at 3 inches deep. Wood chips are available for free or near free in many areas through municipal programs, tree service companies, and community composting initiatives. Shredded leaves, which many gardeners already have available from the previous fall, are one of the most effective and completely free mulching materials available. The point is that this solution operates at a cost low enough that economics are essentially not a barrier. The information is the barrier. People who do not know what mulch does to soil temperature do not apply it, and their summer gardens suffer for it.
Straw is one of the most widely used organic mulches in vegetable gardens, and it earns that status. It is lightweight, easy to handle, breathable, and effective at insulating soil from both heat and cold. Applied at 3 to 4 inches depth, straw creates a reliable buffer between the soil surface and the summer sun. It also decomposes slowly enough to remain useful through an entire growing season without requiring frequent replacement. One important distinction worth making is the difference between straw and hay. Hay contains seed heads from grasses and legumes. Those seeds germinate readily in garden soil and create a significant weed problem. Straw, which is the dried stalks of grain crops after the seeds have been harvested, contains far fewer viable seeds. The difference matters enough that it is worth being specific when purchasing. Wood chip mulch, particularly ramial wood chip mulch, made from the small branches and green wood of deciduous trees rather than the heartwood, has a particularly beneficial effect on soil biology. As ramial wood chips decompose, they support fungal communities in the soil. Those fungal networks assist plant roots in absorbing water and nutrients from the soil, effectively extending the root's reach far beyond what the roots alone could access. A garden bed covered with 2 to 3 inches of wood chip mulch over several seasons develops a biologically rich soil that retains moisture more effectively, requires less fertilization, and supports healthier root systems overall. The initial layer reduces surface temperature immediately. The long-term decomposition improves the soil structure in ways that make heat events less damaging over successive seasons. Shredded leaves are worth discussing in more detail because they are available to most gardeners at no cost, and they perform excellently as summer mulch when handled correctly. The concern that some gardeners have about using leaves is related to matting. Whole leaves, particularly large ones like oak or maple, can form a dense, wet layer that restricts water penetration and air exchange at the soil surface. Shredded leaves do not have this problem to the same degree.
Shredding breaks them down to a size that allows them to settle around plant stems and over soil without forming an impermeable layer. They also break down faster than whole leaves, adding organic matter to the soil through the season. A leaf shredder or a lawnmower run over a pile of leaves produces a useful mulch material that, at 3 to 4 inches deep, works as well as any purchased product for temperature management and moisture retention. Cocoa hulls are a specialty mulch material that deserves mention for its effectiveness and one significant caution. Cocoa hulls, a byproduct of chocolate production, are attractive, lightweight, and have an excellent insulating effect on soil. They also have a pleasant smell when first applied. The caution is their toxicity to dogs. Cocoa hulls contain theobromine, the same compound responsible for chocolate's toxicity to dogs, and a dog that ingests cocoa hull mulch can become seriously ill. Gardeners with dogs in the yard should choose different mulch materials and be aware of this risk.
Pine straw, which is the fallen needles of pine trees, is a commonly available mulching material in the southeastern United States and is widely used in that region for both ornamental and vegetable beds. The concern that pine needles significantly acidify soil has been studied and largely debunked for practical mulching purposes. While fresh pine needles are slightly acidic, they do not lower soil pH to a meaningful degree when used as a surface mulch, because the bulk of the material sits above the soil rather than decomposing into it rapidly. For acid-loving plants like blueberries and azaleas, pine straw mulch is an especially appropriate choice both for temperature management and for complementing the plant's preferred soil conditions. Newspaper and cardboard deserve attention as a base layer for mulching systems. Neither works well on its own as a summer mulch, but both are highly effective when used under a layer of organic material. A layer of cardboard or several sheets of newspaper placed on the soil before applying straw, wood chips, or shredded leaves creates an additional barrier against weeds and adds insulating thickness. Cardboard in particular is used extensively in no-till gardening systems because it kills existing grass and weeds underneath it while decomposing into the soil over time. When combined with a top layer of wood chips or straw, the result is a mulching system with excellent temperature management, strong weed suppression, and a long working life. The application method matters as much as the material itself. A common mistake is applying mulch too thinly. A 1-inch layer of straw or wood chips provides some benefit, but it is insufficient to dramatically reduce soil temperatures in serious summer heat. The research that documents 15 to 25 degree Fahrenheit reductions in surface temperature consistently uses application depths of 3 to 4 inches. A gardener who applies an inch of mulch and then wonders why the garden still struggles in August has not failed at the concept, they have simply not applied enough material. A second common mistake is applying mulch directly against plant stems. Mulch that sits in direct contact with stem tissue creates a persistently moist environment against the stem surface, which promotes fungal rot and can damage the vascular tissue of the plant. The correct practice is to pull the mulch back a few inches from each stem, creating a small, clear ring around every base of plant. This allows air circulation at the stem, prevents moisture accumulation against the plant tissue, and still delivers full insulation to the root zone surrounding the stem. The mulch does not need to touch the plant to benefit its roots. The timing of mulch application in spring and early summer is another factor that experienced gardeners pay attention to. Applying mulch too early in spring can work against the gardener because it insulates the soil from the warming effect of spring sun and delays the soil temperature increase that seeds need to germinate and transplants need to establish. The better approach is to allow the soil to warm to appropriate planting temperatures, then mulch after transplants are in and established. For most regions of the country, this means mulching in late spring or early summer, after the last frost date and after transplants have been in the ground for 1 to 2 weeks and have resumed active growth.
Perennial beds, unlike annual vegetable gardens, often benefit from year-round mulch maintenance. A layer of mulch maintained through the seasons protects shallow roots from temperature extremes in both directions, holds moisture that supports root growth through dry periods, and gradually improves soil structure as it decomposes. Perennial plants like hostas, daylilies, black-eyed Susans, and ornamental grasses that share a bed with mulch consistently outperform the same plants in bare beds during summer heat events because their root zones remain cooler and more stable. Container gardens present a related challenge with a different solution set. Containers heat much more dramatically than in-ground beds because the soil volume is small and the container walls absorb and radiate heat on all sides. A ceramic or plastic pot sitting in direct afternoon sun can reach soil temperatures that genuinely cook roots. The common responses are to move containers to afternoon shade, to double pot containers by placing them inside a larger pot with insulating airspace between them, and to use light-colored containers that reflect more solar radiation than dark ones. Light-colored fabric grow bags, now widely available, are notably better at managing root zone temperature than dark plastic containers because they allow air to pass through the walls, which carries heat away from the soil. The temperature difference between a dark plastic pot and a light fabric grow bag in full summer sun can be significant enough to visibly affect plant performance. The moisture retention benefit of mulch compounds the temperature benefit in ways that matter considerably during summer heat. Bare soil loses surface moisture to evaporation rapidly in hot weather. On a dry, windy day with temperatures in the 90s, a watered, bare garden bed can dry to the point of stress within 24 hours. The same volume of water applied to a mulched bed may last 2 to 3 times as long before the soil moisture reaches the stress threshold. This means the mulched garden requires less frequent watering to maintain plant health, which matters practically for gardeners who travel, water on a schedule, or live in areas with water restrictions during summer. The water applied reaches deeper into the soil and stays there longer instead of evaporating from the surface. Weed suppression is the third significant benefit that mulch provides, and it interacts with the summer heat problem in a specific way. Weeds compete directly with garden plants for water and nutrients. During summer heat stress, when a garden plant is already working harder than usual to maintain itself, competition from weeds makes the stress more severe. A well-mulched bed has dramatically fewer weeds because the mulch layer blocks the sunlight that weed seeds need to germinate. The weeds that do emerge are often easier to remove because they have germinated in loose mulch material rather than compacted soil. The labor saved in weeding a mulched bed compared to a bare bed over the course of a summer is substantial, and it redirects attention toward the maintenance that actually improves plant health.
There is a common worry that mulching promotes slug populations because slugs are associated with cool, moist conditions. This concern has some validity in wet climates and in situations where mulch is applied excessively thick and allowed to stay consistently waterlogged. The practical management is straightforward. Maintaining mulch at a depth that is sufficient for temperature and moisture benefits without creating a perpetually sodden layer usually does not produce significantly higher slug pressure than a bare bed. In dry climates, mulch does not create the conditions slugs prefer, even at appropriate depths. In wet climates, where slugs are genuinely problematic, managing mulch depth and maintaining good drainage usually addresses the concern without surrendering the benefits. Soil biology responds positively to mulch in ways that continue to be studied and that have clear practical implications. The organic layer at the soil surface creates habitat for the soil organisms that build soil structure, cycle nutrients, and support root health. Earthworms, in particular, are more active and more numerous under mulched soil than under bare or compacted soil. Earthworm activity aerates the soil, improves drainage, and contributes to nutrient availability in ways that benefit roots directly. A garden that has been continuously mulched for several seasons often develops noticeably different soil texture and color compared to its original condition, with the mulch layer gradually incorporating into a richer, more biologically active topsoil. This is a cumulative benefit that compounds over years.
The connection between mulch and fungal networks in the soil deserves specific attention because it explains why mulched gardens can develop a kind of resilience that goes beyond what any single application of fertilizer or irrigation can provide. Mycorrhizal fungi, which form symbiotic relationships with the roots of most plant species, extend their filamentous networks through soil and organic matter. Those networks are fragile and easily disrupted by soil disturbance and by the extreme temperature cycles of bare soil. A consistently mulched, minimally tilled soil environment supports fungal network development over time. As those networks become more established, plant roots gain access to water and nutrients from a larger soil volume than they could access on their own. The plants become more efficient at sustaining themselves through heat and drought stress, not because any single factor changed, but because the soil system became more functional. What this means practically is that a garden under mulch is not simply a garden that stays cooler today. It is a garden that becomes progressively more capable of handling difficult conditions over multiple seasons. The first summer of mulching reduces soil temperatures and retains moisture. The second summer adds improving soil structure and developing fungal networks to those benefits. The third summer and beyond has a garden with measurably different soil biology and texture than the same garden would have if bare and tilled. Gardeners who maintain mulched beds consistently often report that their water use drops over time, that their plants recover more quickly from heat events, and that fertility requirements decrease as the soil becomes self-sustaining in ways that depleted, bare soil cannot be.
The practical starting point for any gardener who has not been mulching consistently is to obtain material and apply it this season rather than waiting for a perfect setup. A garden center bale of straw, a load of wood chips from a local arborist, or a bag or two of shredded bark applied at 3 to 4 inches is enough to change the outcome of what remains of the summer. The soil temperature in the treated areas will drop, watering intervals can extend, root zone stress will decrease. Plants that would otherwise struggle or fail in August may continue producing into September. These are not speculative improvements. They are the predictable result of applying a well-documented, inexpensive intervention correctly. The gardener who walks outside in July and sees wilting plants at midday is not necessarily doing anything wrong with watering or feeding. The root zone may simply be too hot for the plant to function normally. Pulling back a handful of mulch from a well-maintained bed and touching the soil surface below it during a heat wave tells the story clearly. The soil is cool, it is moist, it smells of earth and organic activity. 3 inches away, where the mulch ends and bare soil begins, the surface is dry and hot to the touch. That sensory comparison is the most immediate demonstration of what mulch actually does, and it is more persuasive than any data table. Summer heat is a fixed variable in most of the country. What a gardener can control is the environment around the roots. Building a buffer between the sun and the soil, using nothing more than organic material applied thickly and maintained through the season, is the most direct and cost-effective way to keep plants functioning through the conditions that would otherwise end their season early. The plants do not experience summer differently because of mulch. The summer is exactly as hot and long. They experience a different soil environment, and that difference is where the outcome of the season is decided. Every garden that loses plants to summer heat without mulch in the bed is essentially leaving a solution on the table. The information has been available for decades. The materials are cheap or free. The labor required is minimal compared to the cost of replacing plants and replanting. A bag of straw or a wheelbarrow of wood chips applied once in late spring, refreshed occasionally through the season, is the closest thing to a guaranteed return on garden investment that exists. The roots stay cool, the soil stays moist, the plants stay in production. That is the full scope of what this solution does, and it has been doing it reliably since gardeners first started paying attention.